Alright, welcome back. So in this video I will try to explain to you how to actually tackle the problem that we had on the homework where you have to add a functional group here. And so the functional group that you were given in this case was the ether functional group. So you know that an ether is in between two carbons, kind of like a sandwich. So what you want to think about in this case is that after you generated the appropriate amount of carbons that you need, so a 5-carbon framework like I've done in the previous video, what you want to do now is you want to think about attachment points or in-between points for the carbons, for the oxygens of the ether that you have to put into this framework. So starting from the 3 different structures that you can generate for a pentane structure, you can think about where to put the oxygen. So I will just indicate this by drawing arrows next to the bond where the oxygen could go in between. So first of all, if we look at the linear structure, what we could be doing is we could put the oxygen in between this carbon and that carbon. Then alternatively, we could put the oxygen in between this carbon and this carbon. We could also put the oxygen in between this carbon and this carbon, so here, but it turns out that this is the exact same structure as if we put it in here. And if we put the oxygen in between this carbon and this carbon, we actually end up regenerating the structure that we generated in the first place. So out of this particular structure, you get 2 unique structures with an oxygen in there. So then if you look at the fully branched structure, you can put the oxygen in between this carbon, the quaternary carbon, and this primary carbon, and you can do that in every single case of these bonds, but you actually end up regenerating the same structure over and over again. So you generate one single unique structure from the fully branched structure. Now, in the last one, we can either add the oxygen in between this carbon and this carbon, or we can add the oxygen in between this carbon and this carbon, or we can add the oxygen in between this carbon and this carbon. Lastly, we could add the oxygen in between this carbon and this carbon, but that's the same as if we do the first operation that we have done. So now let us draw all the different structures that we can get from that. So from the first structure, like I said, there is only one single structure that you can get, and it looks like this. From the second structure, you can generate this plus this. And from the last structure, you can generate this plus this plus this. So those are all the different structures that you can get when you have to put an ether functional group into a 5-carbon framework. If it's a different functional group than an ether, for instance it would be an alcohol, you have to keep in mind that an alcohol always sits at the end of a bond. So in this case you wouldn't be thinking about putting it in between 2 carbons, but you would be thinking about attaching it to the end of one of the carbons. The same goes for chlorine. For nitrogens, it can be in between, or it can also be at the end of any given carbon, but at least I will tell you which functional group I am looking for to minimize the number of different structures or different isomers that you can draw in the end. So this video just explains to you how to do that for the ether functional group, but really you can use that for any given functional group that you will encounter for constitutional isomers. Lastly, I will explain this for structures that have 1 unit or more units of unsaturation. So stay tuned and watch the next video.